Hi everyone, it's Monica, and welcome back to Tailor-Made Cards for You. Well, today I am going to share with you a project I created for a video hop that I'm participating in, and the video hop is called One World. And I wanted to create a card for you, but when I kind of sat down to create my project, what came to me was this little tag, and it's just a little tag where you can stick tickets on the back, or maybe you can write a little note, just something to show that we are one world and we're all in it together. Now, like I said, originally I thought about just creating a little insert for a junk journal, or maybe just a little note card, but then I ended up adding the little pocket in the back to add some vintage train tickets, but really it's just the idea of the project to show that we are one world, and we are all in this together. So let me go ahead and show you how I put this cute little tag together. Now, one of the things that I really like about this little tag is I'm able to use the smallest paper dolls. And I know a lot of times we have a hard time finding projects to work those little people in, but this tag is perfect for that. So you're going to want to start out with a piece of cardstock, and I'm using the Tim Holtz. It's double-sided, and it has just some great layers. And it's going to measure about 6 3/4 by 3 1/4. Now, the first tag that I created, I used just a piece of paper out of this little box that has already pre-cut paper, but you can certainly just find some of your own paper. And again, I would recommend double-sided, and then just cut a piece to the size that I just indicated. And then I used a couple of dies. Actually, I just used one die, and it was this world die here. And then the actual word one, I used out of some chipboard that was already pre-cut. Now, if you're using the little cards that come in that box that I shared with you, the edges are already rounded. But if you cut your own cardstock, then you're going to probably want to go ahead and round your corners. And I'm using my Chomper here to just get some nice rounded corners. And then once I have my paper rounded, then it's time to go ahead and put this together. Now, like I said, this is a very easy, simple design. If you wanted to go a little bit more difficult, you could easily create your own layers. But I'm using some paper that already has some layers built into the design. So after I cut out the world using my die, I went ahead and I put it aside, and I wanted to go ahead and start working on these letters. And like I said, these letters that spell out the word one are just some letters on some old grunge board that I had. And when I did the first tag, I added the ink first, and then I added some of the distress embossing glaze, because I didn't think that the color would come through because it is a transparent or translucent glaze. But I went ahead and I decided to give it a try without adding the ink, just to see if it would actually work. So to add my color, I'm going to go ahead and use, I'm using Broken China. On my first tag, I used the green, which is the peeled paint, and I wanted to kind of match the world. So since I had a blue world, I wanted to go ahead and add some blue embossing glaze. So I'm starting out by using my embossing dauber, and I'm just pushing it down, adding some of that embossing ink so I can go ahead and add my embossing glaze right to my letters. And like I said, the color that I'm going to be using is the Broken China. So you're going to want to find some sort of a scrap paper to put underneath your letter. This is just like regular embossing powder, but it's your embossing glaze from the Distress line. But it kind of works the same way. It's it has the small particles of the plastic, and it's going to give you some great color once you heat it up. But you definitely want to have some sort of a paper backing, so that way when you pour it over your image, you can go ahead and put the rest of it back into the bottle. Definitely don't want to waste this. It can be used over and over again, so you just want to pour the excess back into your bottle. And then once you have your letter covered, then you just want to take your heating tool and add the direct heat right over the embossing glaze. Now you're going to want to repeat this process with all three of your letters. So you're just going to do exactly the same process. You're going to add that embossing ink from your dauber and put it right over the letter, and then you're going to add your embossing glaze over that, and then you're going to heat set it. And then once you have all of those embossed, then you're going to want to take out crayon or some ink, something to go ahead and edge up the outside of your letters. Remember, this is grunge board, so there is a little bit of an edge. Now I'm using the salty ocean is what I'm using here. So it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the same color. If you recall, the embossing glaze that I used was broken china. So just find a blue that will coordinate well and then edge up your color. All right, so once you have all three of the letters colored, then we're going to want to go ahead and work on our world. All right, now there really is no exact process that you have to take when you're putting this together. If you want to add your world first, you can certainly do that. Or if you want to add your letters first, that's fine as well. You have enough room where you can just kind of figure out exactly where you want your pieces to go. And whether you glue one down first or the second one, it really doesn't make a difference. Now, keep in mind, if you are going to create this or make this into a tag, you want to leave some room at the very top so you can punch a hole and put some ribbon through. I didn't necessarily want to put these together as tags. I wanted them to kind of stand alone, just like little cards, so that way you can insert them into journals. You can use them as little note cards, just a lot of different things you can do with these. So I went ahead and I didn't punch a hole in mine, and I didn't have to be too strategic when I glued down my word one. So the glue that I'm using is the 3-in-1 beacon, and you've seen me use this before. It's a very strong adhesive. And because this grunge board was a little bit thicker, I wanted to make sure that it would adhere nicely. So I went ahead and I used this for my adhesive. Now, when I started to work with the letter N, I noticed that there was a little bit of the embossing glaze that didn't quite cover my letter. So before I started gluing down my words, I went ahead and I added just a little bit more glaze, so that way it was completely covered. And then I was ready to go ahead and adhere my word. Now, there's a lot of adhesives you can use to glue down your letters. You could use tape, you can use glue like I'm using. You could probably even use some of the Collage medium. But you want to find something that's really strong, and that's why I always choose to go to my 3-in-1 beacon, because this adhesive is really strong, and I know that my words won't come up, especially if I'm going to use these as journal inserts where you're going to be pulling it in and out from a journal page. I wanted something where I knew that my letters wouldn't come loose. So I'm going to go ahead and just use that and glue down this word to my paper. And then once I have these glued down, then I'm going to go ahead and work on my world. Now for the world, I decided not to use my 3-in-1 beacon, and that's because, as you can see, this world is very intricate. And if I would have used this glue, it would have gotten really messy. It would have gone all over my fingertips. And I really didn't need something that strong, because, again, it is a very thin type of a die. So a thinner adhesive I think would have worked fine, and that's why I chose to go with my Collage medium. With Collage medium, I can just pretty much spread it all over the place, and I know it's going to stick down. Now, Tim does have some brushes that work well with this Collage medium, but I find my finger to work just as well. I just kind of dip it right into the bottle, and I'm able to just smear it all over the back of the world. And as you can see, I'm adding the Collage medium to some of the bigger pieces of the world. And you can certainly add it all over, but just note that some of that distressed Collage medium is going to come through those holes, which is fine, because once you place the world down, then you're going to go ahead and spread it through, and it's going to dry really nicely. So once you get all of the distressed Collage medium all over your world, just give it a few minutes. You can certainly air dry it, or you can use your heating tool if you're a little impatient. but it will dry fairly quickly. It's a pretty good medium when you are doing some collaging, and it dries fairly quickly. Okay, so once the collage medium was dry, then it was time to go ahead and work with my little miniature paper dolls. And as you saw on the first tag that I created, I just used the one paper doll and I put her right in the middle of the world. But for the second little tag, I wanted to go ahead and use 3 of my paper dolls. So depending on the size of your paper doll, you can use 1, 2, or 3, and it would work just fine. And I wanted my paper dolls to pop up just a little bit, so I am using some foam tape to go ahead and pop those up, so that way they have a little bit of a dimension. All right, so at this point, you're going to need to decide if you want to color up your paper dolls, if you want to leave them black and white. Honestly, I think either way would work great. They always look great when they're black and white, but if you want to just add a little bit of color, then you can certainly do that as well. Now for mine, I did decide to add a little bit of color, and I am going to use some of my distressed crayons along with a water brush just to add a little bit of color. And this is a very simple technique. All you need to do is just get your distressed crayon, and the way that I do this is I'll typically take my crayon and I will put it right on the paper doll. So I'll just rub some of that color onto my paper doll, and then I'll take my water brush and I'll move the color around. I find that rather than rubbing the crayon onto a surface and adding water to it, that this technique is just a little bit better, because if you have too much water, then for me, the technique doesn't work very well. So I like to go ahead and add the color right to my paper doll, and then just take a little bit of water from my water brush to move the color around. And this way you can control the amount of water. So if you find that when you are coloring your paper doll that there's too much water, you can just easily take your paper towel and just dry off that tip a little bit. And because the water brush that I'm using is the kind that has water in the body of the brush, you can control the amount of water that's going to come through. Now, if you want to have just a little bit less color, you can certainly just take your water brush and rub it against the crayon as I'm doing here. And this way you have a little bit less color coming onto your brush. And as you can see, I am coloring the stripes. So I had a smaller area to work with, so I wasn't really able to add the crayon directly onto the paper doll. So I went ahead and just grabbed some of that color from my crayon to add the color to the paper doll. And I'm doing this with all 3 of the characters. I used the brown for the gentleman on the top right part of the world, and then I used some of the pink for the little girl with the flag, and then I came in with some blue for the lady in the middle. And it was a really nice combination. It's just very subtle. The color isn't very deep. It's just enough to give it a little bit of a tint to add some color to your characters. All right, so once you have all of your coloring done, you're pretty much finished with your tag. And at this point, you can decide if you're going to turn it into an actual tag by punching a hole, or adding a little pocket in the back like I did to add some tickets for a little keepsake or a little gift. Now, while many of us may not want to remember this time in the world with this coronavirus going on, it is definitely a significant part of history, and it's something that probably will, well, not probably, it definitely will make the history books. So this is a good way to document how you're feeling, maybe give it as a keepsake to a friend, let them know that you're thinking of them, but certainly something we may want to document to show us how we were actually feeling during this time. Now, don't forget, this is a video hop, so be sure to check out the link in my description box, so that way you can pop over to the next video and you can see their interpretation for our video hop, which is One World. I'm sure you're going to get lots of ideas and hopefully give you some inspiration to help you create during this time. I had a really hard time putting together an idea, and I'm not sure why exactly. I haven't been very creative over the last couple of weeks. You would think that this time you would have more time on your hands to create, but I've struggled with some of my creativity. So hopefully you've enjoyed my project today, and I've given you some ideas for some little keepsakes, maybe for some friends or just for yourself. All right, everybody, take care of yourself, and thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.